Hi there, Tom from A2 Agile back with you yet again. And if you've been following along with some of my videos recently, you know I've been talking about how great bands are like agile teams. They are agile teams. And I thought that, one of the great things about agile teams is they evolve over time. They grow, they get better, they change. And I thought, let's pick out a great band that no one would ever argue is not a great band and take it apart and see what that evolution might look like. So I picked out Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin is a band that, was around for a short enough period of time that I can run through their discography pretty quick, but long enough that you can actually get a sense of that evolution. So let me start out. I'm going to play some music for you and just talk a little bit about this evolution as we go. Let's start out with the first album, the eponymously named Led Zeppelin. And what you have here is the blues. And we all know that rock and roll was built on the blues.
You know you shook me. You shook me all night long.
And this tune, believe it or not, was actually written by the great Willie Dixon, one of the giants of the blues. And there's, of course, some tunes that the band wrote on this album as well. But I wanted to highlight the blues roots because that's a theme that's going to recur through their entire career as a band. So let's move on to the next album, Led Zeppelin 2. Now, I was originally going to use the Whole Lotta Love tune on this album, but ran afoul of the copyright gods. So I'm going to go with a tune called What Is and What Should Never Be.
If I say to you tomorrow,
Now, this one starts out slow, and it does have a little of that
take my hand, child, come with me.
bluesy feel to it.
It's to a castle I will take you.
Love this bass line.
Where what's to be, they say, will be.
Now it rocks. And this really becomes the signature of the band as they evolve. You'll hear this over and over again. It's part of their rock and roll roots. But there's stuff on there like the Lemon Song, which is another blues tune. So the blues is still there. It's part of their roots. And the third album actually had a lot of acoustic sounds in it. But one of the iconic songs off that album starts to show, it's still rock and roll, but it starts to show their migration into their next phase. You may recognize this one. See, this is not a blues motif here. This is rock and roll. So you get the sense here that there's something going on, something fresh, something new. All right, let's keep moving here. Led Zeppelin 4, one of the great albums and produced probably the greatest song that they ever made. I mean, most people wouldn't even argue with it. And it's one of those songs that almost everybody's going to recognize right away. And this song really shows that they are on the verge of something different and new, because this song was an epic tune with like multiple parts, and I'm going to actually do the modern day equivalent of dropping the needle on this tune, because it kind of goes on with this slow part, but then it picks up. Let me move up just a little bit here. So now we're kind of into a light rock and roll theme, and it goes on like this for a while. But then this tune becomes a solid rocker. So it's picking up. See how it's gradually picking up? And then finally, it's rocking. The band had really never done anything of this magnitude before, and a lot of the tunes on this album were, like I said, they were sort of precursors to the next step of their progression as a band. And I would say this album I would call this the last album of their rock and roll phase. Now, they never gave up on the blues. In fact, in this album, there was certainly some blues tunes like rock and roll. That old theme is still there. But then we go on to their next album, which was Houses of the Holy. And Houses of the Holy, it is by far and away my favorite album. The songs on this album are so different and unique. And it was the beginning of their entry into prog rock. And I think one of the tunes that really exemplifies that is a tune called Dancing Days. See, they're using a half step there, which, is not something that you see a lot in blues, maybe a half step in a turnaround or something, but to use it as part of the main theme, it's totally not the blues. It's a very progressive thing to do, and you'll see evidence of this all the way through the album, and the same kind of epic development that they did on Stairway to Heaven. You see that in The Song Remains the Same and No Quarter, and tunes that just evolved really gradually. And then they went on to expand on that with their next album, Physical Graffiti. And the most iconic tune on that album by far was a song called Kashmir, which you may recognize. Again, no evidence of blues here. And we'll skip ahead a little bit. See, they're actually using some classical motifs here, which is something prog rockers did a lot. All right. We're about to come to the last album in what I would call the prog rock, progressive rock phase. And the Presence album was probably to put it bluntly, their worst album. And they didn't see a lot of commercial success with this album. It was put together in a time when the band was kind of struggling a bit, but it did have a couple nice tunes on it. Whereas Physical Graffiti had a song like Boogie for Stew, which was a blues. This one had something called T for One, which was a blues. But they continued on with their with their prog rock theme that they were working with. And this song, Achilles' Last Stand, was maybe one of the better known tunes on the album, if there was such a thing. Yeah. Very progressive. Dropping the needle a little. Kind of takes you on a little journey. So that was like the last album of their prog rock era, and then they did something probably nobody expected. They actually moved in a more of a pop direction. And in fact, this last album, which is Into the Outdoor, was produced, believe it or not, in ABBA's studio in Sweden. It went to Billboard #1 in 2 weeks. And a lot of the tunes on this album were hits. It's clearly not the same flavor as their prog rock stuff. And unfortunately, due to John Bonham's early demise, this was the last album that they made. They broke up 3 weeks after his death. And sadly, we don't know what would have come next, but clearly they were moving into a new period in their music making. And I hope that this shows you that bands, like good agile teams, don't just sit there and rely on the things that worked for them before. They're constantly reinventing themselves and looking for new ways to create. And I hope that you will use this idea as something, as a motivation to look at ways of improving your team, and use it as a concept of what do we do next? What's our next big thing? Like, you should be thinking about that. What's your next phase, your next era? And sometimes you have to, you can stay with what you're doing and evolve it for a while, but every once in a while you've got to make those big sweeping changes to take yourself to the next level. I appreciate this was a little bit longer video than normal. I hope you enjoyed some of the music that I played. And as usual, I would love it if you would click on the little A2A logo down below the screen here and go to our channel and hit the subscribe button, because I'd love to have you as a regular viewer of these videos. I'm going to be making a lot more. Some will be more fun than others. I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Bye.